What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm going to be going over 10 guarantees of every NFL season. As we all know, the NFL season is rapidly approaching us, and every year we see some trends that seem to stay the same every single year, just in different forms. And today, I plan on going over 10 of these trends that are going to possibly come back next year. We'll start out with the Super Bowl hangover. It seems that every year, one of the teams that made the Super Bowl fall off of a cliff the next season. And this could be because of a couple different things. One reason, and a very common reason, is that they sign a bunch of old players who go there to win a Super Bowl and then retire afterwards. A lot of people go to super teams as a farewell tour, and it leads to that team being really good for that 1 year, but then it leads them to have a bunch of holes the next one. Another reason is that they draft a bunch of good players the years prior, but that leads to some financial issues where they have to let some big names go. Another reason is that they get injured a lot, and it leads to their team to fall off. Either way, one of the top two teams always seems to fall off, even if it's just for 1 year. Last year, it was the San Francisco 49ers due to the insane injury pull that they had. And next year, I expect it to be the Eagles due to losing all those star players. Our next guarantee is one team breaking the roof off of their expectations. Last year, we saw this with a bunch of different teams, but leading the charge was the Commanders. Another very extreme example is the Broncos, who are expected to get the first overall pick. This happens when a team has an exceptional draft and brings in a bunch of new players. Normally there are a couple of players that break out, and normally they have a bunch of chemistry. These players are normally younger and become faces of the franchise for the upcoming years. It also helps the teams a lot that their schedules are typically really easy and they get a great first round pick. When they play bad teams, it helps these players break out and it helps the team learn their identity. They also typically have a new head coach with a new coaching system that enhances the players, and it really makes a new culture in the new area. Our third guarantee is the first overall pick struggles. Normally, the first overall pick doesn't play too well and their first games look really, really bad. At the end of the season, they typically look a little bit better, but they still don't look exceptional. And this trend is because they don't have a good team to work with, as the team that earned the first pick had the first pick for a reason, and that reason is because the team sucked last year and they were the worst team in the league last year. As we all know, last year's example is Caleb Williams, who struggled heavily this year and led his team to a 10-game losing streak coming out of the bye. This trend is something that normally resolves itself in the upcoming years, where we either find out if their struggles are who they really are, or if they have a star in the making and they made a good pick. Our fourth guarantee is that some random player comes out of nowhere and becomes a standout player. Last year, that player was Zach Bond, who was a backup for the beginning of his career before having a resurgence in Philadelphia and becoming one of the best linebackers in the entirety of the NFL. Personally, I had never heard of Zach Bond prior to his trade, but this one makes less sense most of the time, where they suck on one team or a couple different teams and they break out on their new team, or they break out due to some other circumstances. Sometimes they're backups and sometimes they just didn't play well when they had the chance. They typically use that momentum and stay on that high level for a while, but the only issue is that sometimes they're older and their careers don't have much in them. For example, Zach Bond is already 28 years old, which for a linebacker is kind of creeping up. Our fifth guarantee is similar to the last one. This guarantee is that there will be someone picked late in the draft who blasts through expectations and becomes a superstar. Drafting is one of the hardest parts of being an NFL GM, and there always seems to be someone who gets picked later on with little to no expectations but becomes one of the best players at their position. Last year, we saw this with Bucky Irving, who was drafted in the 4th round and didn't even play for most of the season but still ended with over 1,000 yards. And a very popular example of this is Tom Brady, even though it took him a little bit. Another very, very popular example from 2 years ago is Puka Nacua, who's drafted, I believe, in the 5th round, and then he broke out. Now he's a top 15 receiver in the NFL. These players often become fan favorites and often become a major name by the end of the year, where they continue to dominate for many years to come and are always in the ring for offensive or defensive rookie of the year. Our sixth guarantee is the exact opposite of the one that we just talked about. This is where there is somebody who's picked very high in the draft, normally top 10, who does not live up to their expectations, and people think that he's a bust. One example from this past year is Marvin Harrison Jr. And as we saw, Marvin Harrison, he did not play very good. He was hyped up to have a 1,500-yard season just coming out as a rookie, as his dad is Marvin Harrison, but he only put up around 800 and had some issues. This player may become a bust, but many times they also prove themselves in the upcoming year and revive their status. Their failing could be because their team is bad, because they need an adjustment period, or because they just aren't ready for the NFL yet. There are a couple of these players of all different kinds, normally a few each year. And one other kind is JJ McCarthy, who was hurt for the whole year, therefore being a letdown for that year, who is now looking to have a resurgence going into 2026. Our 7th guarantee is that there is a major injury for a good team which uproots their season and makes them fall. One example from this year is Tua Tagovailoa, who is coming off his best year of his career and was an easy MVP candidate, led the league in offensive passing yards. They had one of the best offenses that we'd seen in the past 5 years, but he got injured, and without him, the Dolphins couldn't get it together, and they didn't even make the playoffs. This player is normally a quarterback because of the sheer value that they have and how much they elevate everybody else on their offense. Without these players, the offense normally looks sluggish or messy, or the defense looks sluggish or messy, or the holes left by the injury gets attacked often. This player is typically also a captain and a leader, where without their presence, the team is less together. This guarantee can break a team, and the longer the injury, the further the team gets from the postseason, and it's really sad to see this when it's somebody who continues to get injury like Tua Tagovailoa. Our 8th guarantee is that one division becomes unbelievable, typically with 3 of the teams making the playoffs. We saw this with the NFC North last year, where we saw 3 teams with over 10 wins. This division is a brawl for the entire season, with there often not being a clear division winner until the season is over, as we saw this with the Vikings and Lions in Week 18 battling it out for the first seed. These interdivisional matchups are the ones that everyone watches and keeps track of. The division typically has the 1 seed going into the playoffs, and a team that comes out of nowhere and suddenly begins to compete and makes the playoff, kind of similar to what we saw with Minnesota, who people thought with Sam Darnold would fall. The bottom team is typically only there because they have to play their division 6 times a year, where they lose most of those, which is kind of what we saw with the Bears. Our 9th guarantee is the exact opposite of this, where there's a division that just sucks all around. They typically have the 4th seed in the conference and a team that wouldn't make the playoffs without the games being against their own rivals. This year, there were pretty much 2 of them, with my choice of the superior one being the AFC South. This division had a 10-17 and only one other team that had over 5 wins, with the worst team getting the 1st overall pick in the draft as well. This division is typically worse than our division this year, where sometimes there's only one team with over 7 wins. Sometimes you see a team go with an under 500 record make the playoffs because of how weak the division is. The division leader typically gets the bulk of their wins from the other teams in their division, and this is just the exact opposite version of the last point. This division usually gets back on their feet in a couple of years because of the pure mass of high picks, but while they're bad, they are really bad. Our final guarantee is that some old player who played really good the last season falls off of a cliff and becomes the weak link on a team. Last season, we saw this with players like Kirk Cousins, who was an MVP candidate the previous season and was relegated to the backup spot by the end of this season. It's always a sad thing to see, and these players are players who a lot of people grew up watching while they were dominant. These players typically are either on a new team that season or the following season, as they either are going into a new phase where they travel teams, trying to reignite that flame that they once had. Sometimes, like Kirk, it's due to an injury, while other times it's just because of age and their body slowing down. They normally lose some major part of their game, which makes up a lot of their skill, and are stuck mentoring younger players who are there to establish a new future for years to come. It's always a disappointing sight, but it's something that needs to happen, and something that every team and every old player who is very dominant will experience. And just like that, that is going to end the video. I could make a part 2 to this if you guys really enjoyed. And if you guys want, I can make one at the end of this season talking about what team solidified on each single point of these. This was really fun, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.